subcontractors want some money in advance, or whoever, subcontractors, sorry. How do you get that if you have to go and get a draw every week or whatever the case may be? How do you plan?
It's going to be a challenge. Because
usually just do it on completions. Like you close out your rough plumbing, and then you go to the lender, and they cut you a check, whatever predetermined amount.
But if you as a subcontractor want to pay some amount,
your GC would end up paying.
You put that all into your development cost.
Yeah.
And then if there's like set in stone milestones that everyone can recognize at the same time. Because it's hard to say like when it's done painting, because maybe this room's finished, but the bathroom's not. So it's difficult the bathroom may not even have plumbing fixtures.
so you go to your subcontractors already and let them know this
So
is
that's why they usually have milestones, like achievable.
But you can take like an initial amount, right? Like
yeah, there could be an initial draw
yeah.
that you may be
Before
able to
you start
access.
anything.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that you may be able to access for
Right.
whatever expenses, or potentially even for you to live off of. But as a general rule, the idea behind it is that you're only accessing the funds whenever you absolutely need them, and whenever the costs are sort of being incurred by the individual subcontractors or suppliers or whatever it might be. Now, of course, as also as kind of a general rule, every contractor performs differently and behaves somewhat differently, but inherently, there's that. I'm trying to think of the right word. I don't know, it's desire or that kind of inclination to want to say, okay, my subcontractors have given me a bill for $15,000, so I go get a draw from the bank for $15,000, but yet my subcontractors don't require the money to be payable to them for the next 30 days, so
Right.
to what extent I can use that money for 30 days for something else, only to have to kind of go back again.
Yeah, pyramid scheme.
Yeah, so there are real issues and problems that kind of emerge from that sort of
I
thing.
know.
So we're just talking the other night about, because she wants to wind down on construction, and it's difficult because you're taking deposits from other people, and you're playing, essentially you're building on someone else's deposit.
Right,
So the money's already
right.
been spent.
Yep.
I had another question as far as you evaluating the site. When you have like an urban setting and you have it's mostly developed, and you look at a site that has a property on it and everything else is built, how do you then value the land?
You kind of back into it. I mean, what I would do is say, okay, first of all, there's a lot of different steps in that, but I would sort of say, okay, is the building occupiable as it is for a specific use? And then you sort of come up with kind of what's called a residual land value of, once again, it's kind of the front door, back door sort of thing, and you're basically saying, okay, what is the current revenue stream off of this property, and then ultimately, based on that current revenue stream, here's the total value that would be attributed to this particular building, and compare that number to construction cost to basically replicate that, but making an adjustment for deterioration and kind of obsolescence and whatever else that may have occurred. That if you've got a 5-year-old building that has deteriorated a little bit and hasn't had any rehab done in it, you're going to have to maybe include a little bit of an adjustment for the rehab. But then once you've got that, then you can basically say, all right, here's my total value of what it should be, and then subtract out effectively the land value, or subtract the construction cost to get the inherent land value. That's what's called residual land value.
That number can really fluctuate.
Absolutely.
On, yeah.
No, it can be huge, and that's why I'm sort of saying that is that aspect of being able to spot those kind of unique, weird opportunities, because it was kind of like the issue of what Dustin was saying with regard to the site up there, that because the land is being valued as if it is industrial, where the rents are much lower, the residual land value is pretty low. But all of a sudden, if we change the use to retail or office or residential, all of a sudden that residual land value skyrockets because it effectively it's worth a heck of a lot more, just by virtue of being able to convert that use from one thing to another. And it's the ability, though, to be able to do that that's the key in it. That because so many local governments can be so restrictive on what they will allow you to do in terms of that convertibility aspect that you kind of take your chances with that. Okay. All right. Other questions? These are all great. Anybody else? Okay. Let's take a 5-minute break. Come back and we'll finish up. And then when we come back, we're gonna give you a chance to work in the teams and talk about how you want to kind of think about this.
Doug Corgi.
Yep.
One thing I saw, which I thought was interesting. So we had the winning team, and then the team that got third place. The team that got third place actually did a highest investment on their slides that we could see. And based on that, on their highest and best use, the one that was not the highest and best use was rentals. And team one, the number one team, was all short-term rentals, or long-term rentals. I mean, that was like all their project. So I just saw, how could
specific guidelines for
but there's more. These guys are first, second, third. The team say that's the worst use to use.
This guidelines.
And then these guys did it. And then the other thing I saw was on top of that.
No, yeah, we know that, but.
The number, the team that won had, I think it was 1,060,000
And we don't all have to do it and work on it,
and,
it's just good to bring
so
it
the
to
one
outline all
had
the rules
850,000.
for,
So I was like,
the site
that's a big,
specifically, that way when we're all
big
getting
difference
their
right there.
paid
How are they,
and
What do you mean?
outline.
are they just saying, well,
So like if
fit
there's
on there,
setbacks,
or
if like
is
it's
it the
outlined
regulation
everything,
then
so we're
that's
not going there
obviously-
going over it.
Well, I think that might be.
I mean, so I don't know, I just want to get your thoughts on
I think that might be
how they're looking at things.
I'll think about that all day.
The judges are
Going hard on this deal.
like some great judges, yeah, so you're watching the presentation. Then you have all of these other competing teams that other judges that may not have seen. In other words, how do you have any single judge
Yeah, but
sees
they-
all, say,
like,
40
they don't tell you,
presentations?
they don't
I
tell
think
you.
what happens is you have a panel of judges
Okay, I see
seeing
what you're
They
saying.
do, they'll
different
say like,
groups,
oh,
and
we
so
do not,
I think what you
this
have is
100,000
people being
square feet
advanced to the finals,
maximum,
maybe totally different.
And some of
Yeah, and I
them,
guess
they
on my
don't
mind,
know.
it's just looking at
They
the
told you
PowerPoint.
that?
Yep.
We're not in that
Even
competition.
said it,
You're not.
even the, like,
That's too
they
bad.
may say,
No, and it's not, it was just like, we have a budget of $650 for one team, and that's why I
so
entered
like just,
one team,
you just
and
read
the
over
rest
it,
of
you
the
sort
folks.
of like.
Oh, there's
let
one
the
team who's
idea
going and
skim.
doing
I
it. Oh,
think
he's
that,
No, I
like,
thought
they
you,
would-
I thought you were saying that, okay, let's look at each one of us, look at the.
I don't mean Google anything, I mean outline what.
You just wanna get the
I
A
mean,
players.
I
Right
mean,
now-
go
Wait,
through,
is it
like,
the
what
same
they
project
give
you're
us,
doing
that
right
way,
now?
like,
I'll
we
stop
get
talking.
there,
It's
we're
the
not
same
going
project we're all
over
doing right
it.
now?
Well, it's just, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
But you guys are the ones who are submitting.
Adam and
Awesome.
I took Snapville, had that call.
You got some time in it.
Yeah.
Seems like point of it.
You guys be on your website, everything.
I was thinking if we get somewhere.
For the whole time, and he just
Really?
emails it out.
Well, what we're gonna try to do now is I want your teams to sort
Yeah,
of
the
come up
teams, but then the first round, I don't know how many.
your strategy for kind of how you essentially want to attack this, and I also want to kind of give you a few things
Going on,
to see if you can find online.
No, you can't.
And then
You can't.
just kind of
You
work
can't
through
pay
That's
for
what I
that.
would have done.
So something
You can't
to
pay
do.
for anything or have any.
I know your
outside.
brain
I'll
is
give you
fried.
that.
Today, right?
No,
These
yeah,
guys
yeah,
need help.
yeah, I'll give it to you in a second.
Alright, perfect.
I have to have Bill my first.
Yeah, I got an architect in house.
Oh.
Oh, yeah.
I was thinking about this before, because I used to do it all the time, and mine, yes.
He would never
They're gonna
finish
give us
something
like
on
4
a 5-day.
So I just wanted
to
to
Mine's
figure it
too
out,
then.
it may be that like, people in our group don't end up getting access to go, sorry. I didn't think
I'll
about
be
that
careful
way.
with that. So what I will try to do is just email the case.
Yeah, because I was just thinking like,
Well, actually, you're gonna be the ones getting it, so what I'm gonna ask, I'm assuming Dustin's gonna be specific. So,
he's gonna have to send it to you. I
yeah,
guess.
so all I would want would be just give me the case. I don't need, obviously, all the supporting, other than, well, I don't need the access codes, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
We're gonna, that's one way we'll cripple the rest of the folks. So,
Well, they can ask everyone else for it too.
but no, it's good, that's a good point.
No, I was just, in my head, that's like the stuff that was my head, I'm like, how is this
You're my risk manager.
But, I'm here to identify. Are you serious? I don't charge.
Yeah, she doesn't charge this time.
Where's the top? Yeah, that's true. This is the second time today.
I would say
We did not eat. Oh, the coffee.
like presentations, for me, I usually spend a good amount of time just on like PowerPoint presentations. I was like, that's how I was thinking. You should have something. You don't want to do that.
It's not that I don't want to do it. I can't wrap my head around it. I've tried. To me, I need the content. Like I've done really
Why don't you just work on it?
I don't get What time are you done?
About 12
Yeah.
if we can meet, if we can meet in,
Usually I head back right after class. But
you live where?
yeah, I
First
have
city?
some with some clients that I play with.
No, just no, it's true. I had a high school teacher who called together. There's walls and a gate.
The Jetta?
It's so annoying.
Anyways,
So, I mean, if we can find something.
the thing is by Sunday it's gonna have to be that like I'm putting it together.
Yeah, well, I mean,
And Sunday.
are we just gonna say, yeah, let's say, hey, let's put it together, you finish it, or are we gonna collaborate?
I mean, the way we did it was like, as things were sort of brought together, they were taken May.
Yeah, but the nice thing with Prezi was we could all be logged in.
Yeah, they could all see what I was doing.
I don't know if you can do that.
No, but I mean, I could send it out every once in a while, you know what I mean? If it's like, if I'm working on it and I make changes, I'll just, you know, after like half the day's up, I'll be like, here, like, let me know what changes you want me to make, you know what I mean?
Okay, go ahead and break into your groups. I want you to spend a little bit of time, I guess, talking to your group, and specifically, then a couple of things I want you to sort of start to look up as a group. You can kind of divide and conquer a little bit. But specifically, I want you to look for typical floor area ratios for different property types. I want you to look for building efficiency ratios by property types, parking ratios, landscaping ratios. These don't have to be for Fort Lauderdale, these can be for anywhere. But I want you to find examples, okay? Hop online and find some examples of these, and then we're gonna kind of talk about them. Also, public-private partnerships, one of the things that you ought to be considering, if this is a mixed-use project, and to what extent you could partner with a local government on some aspect of it. You know, is there a component piece that could be a public use, like a shared parking garage, as an example? Could you maybe, you know, partner with them to get a below-market cost of financing because maybe you have a some sort of you know, public venue within your space. Or another way of thinking about it, could you also, maybe as part of that public-private partnership, you're maybe developing affordable housing or low-income housing or workforce housing, you know, as a component piece that may allow you to get a lower cost of financing or potentially additional financial support or regulatory support from the local government. So look for maybe some incentives that might be available. Okay, just find some examples of some of these. Deal structures, what I want you to do is start thinking about, kind of like what we were talking about earlier in the finance course with like a lender participation kind of agreement, what kind of deal structure might you put together in a development deal? You know, would you potentially, you know, what, like how many partners might you want to have? When might you want to pay them? Under what sort of conditions? You know, begin to kind of flesh that out a little bit. And then also talk a little about your debt equity stack with regard to where your financing is coming from. How much of it's potentially going to be equity? How much of it is going to be traditional debt? How much of it may be mezzanine financing in terms of sort of that middle ground of financing from more of like a venture capital or kind of you know, specialty group that finances maybe for particular product types. And then as we already talked about, the construction cost in terms of finding that information, and then also being able to find kind of rental rates and occupancy rates. So what I want you to do is, like I said, individually and as a group, kind of work together and try to, you know, find you know, some examples of some of these, just so that you can kind of very quickly familiarize yourself with these things. And then we're going to talk about them a little bit, and then we're going to be done. Okay?
Let me just.
And one more point. We're supposed to be getting the case study on Wednesday. Whenever this team gets the case study and Dustin gets the case study, he is going to email me the case study, and then I will then forward it to everybody else in the class, and then you guys can kind of begin to work on it. Whenever we meet on next Saturday, all of our time will be committed to working through getting this thing done. They, since they are actually participating in the competition, and I've paid the entry fee for them, they are technically not supposed to get any sort of outside, you know, information or feedback. You guys, both myself and Kevin, will be here to help guide you through the process and answer any sort of questions and help you out sort of along the way. All right, does that make sense, everybody? But you need to have read the case study before you come into class on Saturday, and you need to have probably thought about what your component part of that might be. And broadly speaking, within your teams, you probably need to divide and conquer based upon your own personal sort of background and specialization. My suggestion would be you probably break it out into one person focus on site issues, one person focus on regulatory issues, one person focus on sort of the market analysis sort of issues, and one person focus on the financial analysis. And then you probably have then potentially the other sort of people that you may or may not have in your group would be focused on the actual maybe putting together the presentation. But I would tend to sort of say that each person responsible for this would be responsible for their component part of the presentation. Okay? So what you probably need to do within your groups is sort of figure out which of these 4 categories you're going to be best suited for, and then taking a look at the presentations that were done last year, looking at each of those individual parts and sort of saying, that's what I'm going to be responsible for. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. So get that sort of allocated and then start looking at this information.
Yep. On the deal structure, is there, for the developer, is there like an optimum?
No.
Just because every deal is so different.
Yep.
I mean, obviously you want your biggest participant to be,
yep,
you know, financing.
And both your real estate finance book as well as your real estate development book give examples of different types of deal structures.
plans.